another episode of Beyond the Basics. This is episode 7, part 3. This part's a little bit longer than the other two parts, but this is truly the only part you need to actually do the work. Parts 1 and parts 2 are great explanations to help you understand the why in subtracting positive and negative numbers. So what is subtraction? One way to think of subtraction as the difference between two quantities, or how far apart they are when they're plotted on a number line. Next is taking away, and that's where you actually have something and you take it away. The last way is thinking of subtraction as adding the opposite. That's literally changing the subtraction sign to an addition sign and the second number to its opposite. So if it's positive, it becomes negative. If it's negative, it becomes positive. Those are the three parts. All right, and this is part 3 of our 3-part subtraction series. In this video, I'm going to show you some practical ways to subtract without drawing a number line and without drawing pluses and minuses and taking things away. This is to help you do it quicker in your head. The first rule is boxing, and we're not talking about punching, although I know some of you would probably like to punch your math book or your math problems. It's okay, we're actually talking about drawing a box. And then you add what's in those boxes, and you use the addition rules. Same signs add and different signs subtract. Let's use this one for an example, because you already know the answer to 5 minus 3 being 2. First thing you do is you draw a box around the 5. You draw a box around the number and whatever signs are in front of it. So I box the 5, it's positive, so there's no sign in front of it. Then I have to draw another box around the second number and the sign that's in front of it, and that includes the subtraction sign. So I box the 5 and I box minus 3. Then you look at the boxes and you think, is this a positive or a negative? Well, 5, that's positive. Minus 3, though, if you look at it just as minus 3, it looks like negative 3. And it actually is negative 3. As we discussed in the number line, subtraction is a negative action. So subtracting 3 is a negative 3. Well, then you add what's in those boxes. A positive plus a negative is different signs, so I subtract. And 5 minus 3 is 2. The adding the opposite way is simply understanding this by changing your subtraction sign to an addition sign and the second number to its opposite. So if you look at the 5 minus 3 equals 2, the subtraction becomes a plus and the 3 becomes a negative. So now it's 5 plus negative 3. It's still different signs subtract. So it's just another way of seeing the same thing. This example, negative 5 minus 3, well, you box the numbers and the sign in front of them, and then you tell if they're positive or negative. Both of those are negative, because remember this minus 3, even though it's minus positive 3, subtraction is a negative, and thus the action, the whole box, is a negative action. They are both negative, so it is same signs add. And when you add it, you're going to get negative 8. Well, how do you do adding the opposite on that? You change the subtraction to an addition and the 3 to its opposite. The opposite of positive 3 is negative 3. So you basically draw those two lines. Here's our next example. You draw the boxes around it, and the box that goes around the 3 contains all the signs that are between the 3 and the 5, both the subtraction and the negative sign. So the 5, that's obviously positive. Minus negative 3, if you remember in the number line, if you subtract, it's a negative movement. But if you subtract a negative, it's a positive movement because it's a double negative. It's an opposite of an opposite. It is a not. So on this one, I am not adding 3. Subtraction is I am not adding 3. I'm subtracting it. Subtracting a negative is I am not. And all not-nots are not negative, but they are positive. All not-nots are positive. So these are both positives, and so it's same signs add. And 5 plus 3 is 8. Adding the opposite, you again change your subtraction sign to an addition sign, and the negative on the 3 becomes the opposite of negative, which is positive. So it becomes 5 plus positive 3. 5 minus negative 3 and 5 plus positive 3 are both 8. Last example on this one, you box. The first box there is negative 5, so that's a negative. The second box there is a not. All not-nots are positive. So those two are opposite signs. They're different signs, so we will subtract them. So when you do this subtraction, you're just doing 5 minus 3, kind of ignoring the negatives. 5 minus 3 is 2. And then you think, which do I have more of? Do I have more negatives or do I have more positives? In this case, you look at the 5 because it's the only negative there, and it is bigger than the 3, so you have 2 negatives. And to do this by adding the opposite, you again change the minus sign to a plus sign and the negative sign to a positive. Negative 5 minus negative 3 is the same thing as negative 5 plus positive 3 because they're double negatives. They're an opposite of an opposite. Subtraction is adding the opposite any way you look at it. Whether it's like our first example down in the lower left corner, and that was just a regular first grade subtraction, you get the same thing as when you subtract positive 3 as when you add negative 3. So now I'm going to talk to you guys about something called a not. We're going to use language to teach math, and not just by speaking, but by understanding double negatives. In this first statement, I am at home. I am at home. It is a positive statement because I am at home, and there is nothing in that statement that is an undoer or a negative, because negative is an opposite. I am, the positive is the am. Second statement is, I am not at home. The not is the negative part of the statement. It negates am, so thus it is a negative statement. I am not at home. It is a negative way of stating where I am. Not negative as in good or bad, but just as in I'm stating the negative version, not I am at school. I'm saying I am not at home. What if we put 2 nots in there? I am not at home. We already discussed that not at home is a negative statement, but that not that's in front of that box negates what's in the box. So they cancels it out. If I'm not at home, then I am at home. It is a positive statement because I'm not at home. Thus, if I'm not at home, which is everywhere else except home, then I am at home. So it's a double negative. I am not at home. And in this statement here, you have 2 minus negative 3. That's like 2 minus the opposite of 3, or not subtracting 3. It's 2 negatives right next to each other, which negates it. What about this statement? I am not at home. Well, not at home was negative, means I wasn't at home. Not at home meant I wasn't not at home, thus I was at home. If I'm not at home, where am I? The not at home is a positive. Not home is a negative, and I am somewhere besides home. Write this down in your notebook. Pause as you need to. So in this notes, we've already done the difference and the takeaway. But addition's opposite is also what subtraction is. It's the same as adding a negative. And 5 minus 3 and 5 plus negative 3 are both equal to 2. 5 minus negative 3 and 5 plus 3 are both equal to 8. And lastly, we're going to write down our methods. The first method we are writing down is the boxing method, where you draw a box around the first number and a box around the second number and the signs in front of it. Determine if the boxes are positive or negative, and then you add what's in the boxes. And then the second part is adding the opposite, where you change the subtraction to an addition sign and the second number to its opposite. All right, let's practice this a little bit. We're going to be practicing the boxing and the adding the opposite. Here's our first practice. 3 minus 7. Okay, box. I box the 3 and I box the minus 7. The 3 is positive. The minus 7, remember, it's negative because minus subtraction is a negative motion. It goes down. So you have different signs subtract. So you do 7 minus 3 and take the sign of the most, which is the 7, making it negative 4. All right, how do we add the opposite? Good question. You change the minus to a plus and the positive 7 to a negative 7. And you say 3 plus negative 7, and you still have different signs subtract. And so you subtract them and you take the sign of the most and you end up with negative 4. Next example. Negative 3 minus 7. Box and add. We draw a box around negative 3 and a box around minus 7. Those are both negative. Negative 3 is negative, and remember, subtraction is a negative motion, so it makes that whole box negative. So you have same signs, add. So you do -3 plus -7, which is -10. How do you do this using add the opposite? You change the minus to a plus and the 7 to its opposite. Notice the first number is never touched. That's where you're starting. You don't change where you start. You change where you go. And since we're doing a double change, you're doing the opposite of an opposite, you're going to end up going the same direction. So it goes from -3 minus 7 to -3 plus -7, and those are also same signs add. And when you add them, you get -10. Next example. 3 minus -7. Here's one of those double negatives. So I box the 3 and I box the minus -7. You only box the number with the signs that are in front of it, never the signs that are behind it. Thus, both minus signs are going to be in with the 7. The 3 is obviously positive. What about the second box? Is it a positive? Is it a negative? Is it really, really negative because it's got 2 minuses in it? No, because that is a not. That is like saying, I am not at home. I am not subtracting. Or 7 is not negative. It is positive. So you have a +3 and a +7 because the box is positive. You have same signs, add, because they are both positive. How do you do this with adding the opposite? And adding the opposite, honestly, is one of my favorites because it's just 2 marks. So I change the minus sign to a plus sign and the negative to a positive. And again, I only change the second number. The starting point stays the same. 3 minus -7 is the same as 3 plus +7. And that is same signs add, and you get one more example. -3 minus -7. Draw the boxes, box around -3 and around minus -7. I've said many times you only box the signs that are in front of the number, never the ones behind. So -3, it's obviously negative. What about minus -7? Is that a negative box or a positive box? Subtraction is a negative movement, but remember when you were subtracting a negative, it turned around and it became a positive movement, making the second box positive and the first box negative. So you have different signs subtract. How do you do this with adding the opposite? You change the minus to a plus and the second negative, only the negative on the 7, changes to a positive. And so now you have -3 plus +7. You still have different signs subtract and take the sign of the most. So you do 7 minus 3, which is 4. 7 is you have more positives in this case than you do negatives, so it's +4. Getting this down pat is going to take a lot of practice. So make sure you do several problems. When I did these problems, when I was teaching, I had the kids do 30 or 40 of these at a time. They don't take long because they're single digit subtracting. I kept the subtraction easy just to get used to the signs and what they mean. Because often when you are thinking of negatives, you're working backwards in your mind. And just like learning how to walk backwards is harder to do than going forwards, learning how to think in the negative is harder to get down pat than thinking in the positive. So do lots of practice, give yourself some grace, make corrections, and keep practicing. Thanks for watching Beyond the Basics, episode 6 or 7, whichever one this turns out to be, and have a great day.